Hello my friends, and welcome to this next video in the series where we shall be discussing primitives. We have already seen that we can use the let and the const keyword to declare a variable in JavaScript, and we can also assign values to those variables. So every variable that we create in JavaScript has a data type, and that data type tells us what kind of data that is being stored in that variable. There are two types of data types in JavaScript. One is the primitive data types, and the second one is the non-primitive data types or the reference data types. Under the primitive data types, we have the strings, numbers, boolean, undefined, null. For the non-primitive data types, we have object, function, and array. Today, we should just discuss the basic ones under the primitive data types. So now, let's head back to our VS Code. We've already seen that we can say something like let first name equals Dominic. This right here is a string, and this is known as a string literal. So string is represented by double quotes. We can also use single quotes. And in fact, most people would prefer the single quotes in JavaScript. So let's fall back to the single quotes. So in JavaScript, string can be represented like this. When we have something that we type within quotes, they are seen as strings. And string is nothing but a sequence of characters. So we have DOMINIC as a sequence of characters. Therefore, this is a string. Another thing is that while I've been coding without the semicolon, it is something that was previously required in JavaScript. So at the end of a given statement, you add your semicolon like this. But that is no longer necessary. So we can either choose to have our semicolon at the end of a statement, at the end of typing a particular code like this, or we can leave it out entirely. But from this video onwards, I want to be adding the semicolon just to make things a bit clearer. So I'm going to add this semicolon. So now we've seen what the string looks like. The next one is number. We can say let first number equals 6. This right here is a number. It is just an integer. In other programming languages, you can have something like doubles, floats, and things like that. But in JavaScript, number is a number. So whether we have 6 or 6,000, or we have 6.67, which has a decimal point, it doesn't matter. It is still a number. The next one we shall say is the Boolean data type. So we can say let has eaten equals true. So Boolean can have only two values, one of two values. So it can either be true or it can either be false. If you notice, I've used the style of naming for my variable here, for my Boolean variable. I said has eaten. So you can think of it this way. Have you eaten? If you've eaten, then that's true, right? So I say true. And then if you have not eaten, then it becomes false. So this variable right here, has eaten, has a data type of Boolean. This one right here has a data type of number. And this first name right here has a data type of string. The next one we shall be looking at is undefined. So we've seen that we can say something like let last name without assigning it any value. So this is just a variable declaration without any value to it. Now variables, when they're declared like this, the data type of such variables at the time of declaring it like this is known as undefined. It is actually undefined, right? Because we have not assigned any value to it. And this is the same thing as also saying let middle name equals undefined. like so. Or if I were to use this one, I can also say let last name equals undefined, like so. All right. So let me take it back to what we had initially. And now the last one that I want us to see today is the null data type. So if I say let hobbies is equals null, like so. So null in JavaScript represents the intentional absence of a value. So think of a web page that expects a user to fill in or to choose from a list of hobbies. So the user can choose their hobby, such as badminton, playing table tennis, and so on and so forth. If the user did not choose any hobby, we can represent that hobbies to be null, because in the future, the user can decide to choose a hobby such as badminton. So if in the future the user changes his mind and chooses a hobby like badminton, we can now have something like badminton, like so. But initially the user did not choose any value, so we can have it represented as null. Now, to understand more and to actually see that the variables that we've used here are actually of the data types that we have said they are, let's go back to our Safari browser. And what I'm going to do is that I'm going to pull my Visual Studio Code and my Safari browser side by side so that we can check things out. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, save this my scripting.js file, and then I'll pull the VS Code and the Safari browser side by side. So right here is my VS Code, and on the right is my Safari browser. And remember, on our HTML page, we have linked our JavaScript file using the script tag. And so that means that we have access to these variables that we've used here inside of our console. We can access the variables from our console. All right, so I'm going to use a special function. At the beginning of the video, we've used something like document.write to print something or to write something to the web page itself. We've also used a function called console.log to log something to the console itself. Right now, I want to introduce you to another function called typeof. And now, we have not discussed functions fully in this course, but we shall do so in future videos. But for now, you just understand that typeof is a function that shows us what kind of data type a variable has. So for example, I want to check what is the data type of this first name variable. So I can say first name, and when I click on enter, it says string. So that shows that our first name variable right here is actually a string. Now let's check first number. I'm going to say type of first number. And then it says it's a number. So that proves that our first number here is of the number data type. What about has eaten? So I'm going to say type of has eaten. Now it says is a boolean. Remember, boolean can have either of two values, false or true. What about last name? Let's check things out. Type of last name. Now it says is undefined. And truly, last name is undefined because we have not assigned any value to it. And even if I come here for this middle name and say middle name, let middle name equals undefined. And I'm going to refresh. And let's check middle name now to see type of middle name. It says it's undefined. So in this case, let last name here was just declared but was not assigned any value. So in that case, its data type, the data type of this variable is undefined. In this second case, we declared a variable and assigned it undefined in explicit terms. So the data type of this variable still is undefined. Now let's check hobbies and see what we get. Type of hobbies. We're going to get an object. So even though we have assigned null as the value for this variable hobbies, the data type of these hobbies is an object. And that's because null in JavaScript represents the intentional absence of a value. So right here, we assign null to this hobbies variable. And remember, null in JavaScript is the intentional absence of a value. It is very different from undefined, as you've seen. We check the type of hobbies, this variable right here, and we got object. One of the reasons that it printed object is because null is used in places where objects are expected. So if there is no object there where it expects an object, then it uses null. And so that's one of the reasons we get object printed out here. So these are the basic primitive data types that we have in JavaScript. Not to worry, we're still going to discuss all these primitive types and even more as we go along in this course. For example, this null and undefined and even Boolean, we're going to see how we use them in programs. So we're still going to talk about them in greater details. In the next few videos to come, we're going to talk about strings and numbers and even talk about Boolean, and then see how we can use these data types together to build something that is more meaningful. So my friends, see you in the next video.